Welcome to the Dream Design Job podcast, where we help product designers, new and old, connect and adapt to the latest challenges of forging an innovative career in the tech design space. Dream Design Job aims to look at the design careers from a continuously evolving human perspective, because leading human-centered, balanced lives is ultimately what helps us build truly human-centered products. Hey everyone, welcome back. Here we have myself, Patrick, and also Patrici. How are you doing over there? Nice, good. Today we are going to be discussing design interview red flags. And there's a lot of talk and a lot of interest around interviewing in general. And kind of like what are the things that we want to look out for when us designers are interviewing for different kinds of jobs. So we're going to cover a variety of different kinds of topics. And today we're going to start off with unreasonable expectations for product designers. So Patrici, why don't you let us know what are some of these wild expectations that hiring managers have for designers sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes you can tell the job description if there are red flags at a company. Like knowing how to code. Designer is expected to know how to code. And I mean, some designers do know how to code, and there's that ongoing discussion about whether designers should code or not. But I mean, generally, product designers these days should not need to code unless you're like at a super early stage startup. And if you're a designer who doesn't mind doing that, more power to you. Go ahead and answer that job description. Go ahead and do that interview. But usually, if that's not a strength of yours, and for most designers, especially out of boot camps who have never coded before, this shouldn't be an expectation, really. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the definition of a unicorn, right? Like maybe back in the day when design first started, we talk about design unicorns, and they're essentially ones who know how to do it all. They know how to design, they know how to code, they know how to pitch over to stakeholders, like those, now that the design industry has evolved so much, it is weird to see like that kind of requirement on a job description. I don't see it as often anymore, but every now and then you see it come up and you're just like, hard pass, swipe it away.
Yeah, because another clue about a company when this comes up is, especially nowadays, is that this company may not have boundaries, that they may expect you to do a lot of different things. And yeah, the startups require a lot from their employees, especially if they're super early stage. But if you're simply looking for a design job to craft your design skills, then we would suggest avoiding these ones.
Yeah, that kind of, I mean, for a lot of these, it's like, those kind of descriptions and requirements tell me either two things. Either they really know the kind of person they want to hire, or they don't know anything about design.
Yes. Exactly. They don't know what design is. They just want you to build something. Yeah. Okay, so the next one I would say is if you see like 10 years of experience is required for a mid-level role. And this is a red flag because, I mean, there are some people who have 10 years of experience, but generally I think a lot of designers who are mid-level are more like, I think that's more like 5 to 7. 10 years is expected of maybe like managerial, director, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10 years of experience for entry-level or mid-level roles, that's like, what? Like, we understand you want someone who's experienced, but 10 years, that's like, first off, has design even been around for like 10 years? It has, but, it's just, that's just like, I don't know, a crazy ask in my mind. Another example of a company who just likes to have round numbers in the requirements.
Yeah. Just plop it on there, 10 years. Um, okay, the next thing I have here is designing marketing collateral. So I've seen job descriptions that ask for like video editing from a product designer.
What?
And granted, I know how to video edit, so like part of my ego would be like, yeah, sure. But now that I'm more developed of a product designer, I'm like, no, that shouldn't be included at all in what I'm doing. Again, this is the nature of early stage startups. Sometimes they want you to be able to wear any hat. However, as a requirement, it's kind of ridiculous to expect a designer to need to do marketing and graphic design, because a lot of product designers these days aren't even trained in graphic design. It's a completely different type of design.
Exactly. It's a completely different type of job. You know, you like there are two different kinds of mediums. Yeah, it's just like you know, these companies just don't really know how to properly advertise their job descriptions. Or yeah, they're just looking for someone who is great at everything, which, you know, good luck, because there aren't going to be a lot of candidates who apply to your job.
Exactly.
Although with the 10 years of experience one, I feel like for something like that, if the actual product, like the responsibility description makes sense, then, and I really want to work for that company, then I'll still apply, because maybe it's just like a hard requirement for them from like some kind of legal perspective. I've heard that reason before, so I'll still apply. But for anything else around like coding, around like doing things not related to, you know, mainstream product design, I probably would just pass on.
So how would you gauge whether a company has unreasonable expectations of product designers? I guess if you see anything outside of, you know, collaboration and using a design process to get a result or get certain outcomes, it's usually not a product design role.
Yeah, I would say so. You know, I think if you were to like measure it based off of like how red is this red flag, or, you know, if I see any of these, it is almost like a deal breaker, you know? So on a scale, maybe like 1 to 7, you know, and 7 being like the
Deal
the deal
breaker.
breaker, and 1 being like, yeah, it's fine. Or, you know, yeah, I'm going to apply to this role. It's up there. Definitely like a 6 or like a 5.5, you know? But I think the only thing that makes it not a deal breaker is maybe if you have, you know, some years of experience that are way more than what the role actually calls for, and it's probably just because they want to put the numbers up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if I'm trying to see it from a perspective of someone who likes really early stage startups, maybe they have a lot of experience as a product designer also, and maybe they have some of these skills like they have coded before. If you're a designer who enjoys building things from the ground up, from scratch, and building companies that way, then of course this is not a super red flag for you. But for someone who maybe is early in their career or wants to learn, you probably want a more, what do you call it, refined description here.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then, okay, so the next red flag category is interviewing with strange teams. Patrici, have you ever had these experiences before, or have any examples of potential red flags here?
Yeah, I haven't had many experiences myself, but I have seen or withdrawn from certain processes where I noticed that the hiring manager is not in product or design. Like maybe they're in engineering or they're the head of marketing even. This tells a lot about where the company is actually. it shows like if the hiring manager is an engineer, there may be a lot of tension or movement going on in the product organization. I think I've definitely seen and assessed that from an interview process before. Another red flag is that you don't even interview with any designers. And again, this is normal if you're like interviewing with an early stage startup, but if you're interviewing at a company that should have a pretty good design presence and that's what you're looking for, and none of the design team is in the early part of that interview process, then I'd question why that is.
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience where one company reached out to me and they scheduled an interview, and the person I was interviewing with was just like an engineer. It wasn't even like an engineering manager, just like another engineer. Given they were a startup, but they were in their Series B, and I'm like, y'all made it to Series B without a designer. One, props to you, but two, I'm not about to be like, I mean, at that time of my career, I wasn't about to be the first designer for a company. That just wasn't
Got
what
a
I was
lot of
looking
tech
for.
debt to clean up.
Exactly, so much tech, so much design debt really to clean up. But that was definitely a red flag for me. I was like, y'all are a cool company, but I'm not sure if I want to be reporting to just an engineer.
Yeah. On a scale from 1 to 7 here, for me, depends on how that interview goes. I guess if it was an engineer, if I saw that an engineer was my first interview, it would be a pretty red flag, like 6.
Yeah, mine's always probably like a 6 or, close to a 7 because I don't know, like for an engineer to like understand the intricacy of design, there's always just like a conflict of interest there. It's like the stuff you design, they're going to be questioning even more so because they're the ones who are going to be building it. And it's a risky position to put yourself in if your relationship with that, the head of marketing or like the engineering manager is just, if it's not healthy, then you can't really go to anyone else to kind of fight for you, So, yeah. Anyways, so yes. What about this next one? Too many interviews, as a potential red flag. So, Patricio, how many interviews, is too many?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because everything has changed because of the pandemic. And so interview processes have become a lot harder. And I know I've heard from other designers that having like a really long interview process feels like the company doesn't value their time. Especially because you do have to take off for a lot of these long presentations, portfolio reviews. And, companies often don't think about that. But I have been on the other side where we are currently creating a design interview process and iterating on it and trying to be mindful of people's times, but there isn't a lot of signal that can come through with remote interviews sometimes. And so, it's challenging. This one's a challenging one. I wouldn't say too many interviews is a huge red flag for me. I would maybe give it a 5. As a candidate, though, it is annoying because, there's sometimes you're juggling a lot of these.
Yeah. I heard a metric a while ago that a candidate interviewed with over 20 people and still didn't get the job.
See, that's pretty ridiculous.
It's just like you talk to 20 people. Like, one, why would you put yourself through that? It's like, is it really worth it? And for them not to even get the job after talking to that many people, like, what's going on? That's just not right. That's like an
Mm-hmm.
injustice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that like a huge red flag for you then? Too many interviews.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I was interviewing even at Smart Recruiters, there I spoke with
We did talk to you a lot.
yeah. Did we even talk? I don't even remember. I think you were traveling. I think you were at
I think we talked at the end, probably like the
yeah.
last interview.
Yeah, but I finished with my on-site, and then afterwards, the recruiter wanted me to talk to someone else. I think like the VP of product, and then after that, like just getting another interview with like the CEO, and like I don't know, just like one after the
That's a
other.
tiny interview with the CEO.
Exactly, and then we went
Really.
back to another PM, and I'm like, why do we need to talk to so many people? I mean, fortunately, I got the job, but it was just like, okay, are you gonna spring up another interviewer on me?
Surprise. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I
So
mean, in the scale one to
keep it.
seven, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying, hiring managers who are listening, keep the number low.
Exactly. I
If
mean,
you
at least
can.
have like I think there's a multiple
Intention.
benefits of having that kind of a design hiring
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Be intentional about how you structure
Yeah,
the process.
exactly. But I mean, if on this, scale one to seven, it's gonna be not that big of a red flag for me if there's like too many interviews. I think if it's over like 8 interviews, that's when it gets to like peaking at 7. But if it's within like reasonable range, like under 8,
Do you
then
mean 8 rounds or 8 interviews total? Like, what if there's a back to
like 8 interviews total. So like you
Okay.
have your recruiter screen, and then you have your hiring manager screen, and then you're on site, you have your presentation, and then you have, what is that, 5 one-on-ones. I think like that is just at the peak of like, okay, that's enough. If there's like,
It's manageable.
yeah, anything more than that, it's like, how much more information do you need? It's kind of like user testing. Like, how many is enough?
Uh-huh.
If do you need like 50 user tests in order to say like, okay, we should go in this direction, or will 5 do? So
Good point.
yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so the last the last category we have are design exercises. So Patricia, what are some red flags in this area for you?
Interviewing with companies that require a design exercise is not my favorite thing, because they always say, don't spend more than an hour on this. Don't spend more than 2 hours on this.
Mm-hmm.
But to be competitive, realistically, you're going to have to spend more than whatever amount of time they give you, because that's just the expectations that are on the other side. As somebody who interviews people who do exercises, that's what I have experienced. When you're on the evaluating side, you have high expectations, of course. And so as a designer, you want to meet those expectations. You got to put in the work. And so I don't like it because it is a lot of my own personal time that goes into it. And I mean, I try to keep the amount of investment low when I do exercises. And I really need to have evaluated the company before I decide to move forward with that.
What about
Because
for
I'm
like on-site design challenges, like whiteboarding
like
exercises?
wording, I'm fine with those. Those like are on the spot. The thing about these is you don't have the criteria that they're using to evaluate you a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this opinion is coming from someone who evaluates people who do design exercises, and we have specific rubrics and competencies that we're evaluating that we don't reveal to the candidate all the time. We reveal some of it, of course, but like, do we say, I expect you to have a specific framework that I can understand?
Mm-hmm.
usually frameworks really work when you're undergoing a design exercise, just because they're easy to grasp in the 30 or so minutes that you're given. But design exercises are a whole long conversation that we can get into.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, I don't even like if there's a design exercise for in the process for a company that I'm applying to, like and I find out from the recruiter later on, I'll just be like, oh, I don't want to continue with this process because it's just super stressful,
Yeah, it's a lot of your time and energy. And realistically, if you are a mid-level designer, you're interviewing with a bunch of different companies at the same time. Because hopefully you're interviewing so you can evaluate all of your options. And so sometimes you're doing multiple design exercises around the same time, depending on the timing of your interviews. And so that takes a lot of time and energy. And, if you're motivated to do that, that's great. But it's often, it's a 1 hour that could turn into a job. So it could be a worthwhile investment. But I would do it only if you're really positive about your fit in the company.
Yeah. Or if you really want the job, right? Or you're like a new grad from, a design program or a boot camp, and you're just like, I'll take anything, yes, I'll do a design challenge, whatever. I think it depends on your situation, but yeah, totally.
Yeah, one thing we didn't go into about design exercises is I am cool with doing exercises that are really random or they're like super creative, but one red flag is when the exercise is related to the product that I'm interviewing for, or the company that I'm interviewing for, because at that point they're getting free ideas from interviewing multiple candidates and giving them the same exercise. And some companies compensate, so that's great. But if they don't have the awareness to think about whether or not it's ethical to have an exercise related to their own product, then maybe you should question what the company's values are.
Yeah. Did I tell you that happened to me one time? Where I was doing an on-site design exercise as part of the interview process, and they didn't give me the prompt before. They're like, oh, we'll give you the prompt on the day of. So they gave me the prompt, and like literally there were like 5 engineers on the call. There was like the product manager, the head of design, whatever, and they all wanted me to like redesign their dashboard. And then they're like, how would you do this? And then I was like, come on, really?
You're like,
I actually ended up going through the process because I just like didn't.
Because you were there.
I know. I was put on the spot. I didn't want to say no. I felt so bad because everyone and their moms were like on that call, and I felt kind of rude. I would well, I'm not gonna do this. Although I should have. I didn't even end up getting an offer from that place. So that was like.
Did they see your hesitation? Is that why? Do you think?
I don't know exactly why, but. It might have been that. It might have been some other reasons. Whatever it is, like, it doesn't matter because it was just like a really not cool way of throwing a designer into this kind of situation where you're having them do something for free.
Yeah, boundaries, guys.
Yeah,
Patrick and I are big on that.
Yes. Yeah.
These companies don't own you.
We've experienced so much bad stuff in the past couple of years, or in the past handful of years of our design careers, that we were like, we're not going to take that anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so let's flip it. So what are some interview red flags, like from the company side? How do they see designers, and what red flags do they see in some designers?
Yeah,
Quote red flags.
Yeah, I mean, we've both been on the other end, right? And interviewing candidates and trying to hire solid designers.
Yeah.
Um, some red flags that I see are like designers who don't really talk about their collaboration efforts with product or with engineering, or with like research if they have experience with that, or with like content writers. Um, if I like don't hear any kind of collaboration, that's like a huge red flag for me. Just because
Mm-hmm.
collaboration is such a large piece of the design process and like the product development process, and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
like your delivery is successful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Another one related specifically to just like the interview process is like when they present their portfolio or when they present their work and it's messy, right? Like it's just like it looks sloppy, things aren't aligned. It just feels like they didn't put a whole lot of effort um, into that presentation, and it like doesn't. It leaves like a bad taste in your mouth as like as like a hiring manager or as like an interviewer, um, because this person is interviewing for like a design position, right? Like there are
Mm-hmm.
some like basics around being a designer that you should have a solid grasp on, right? One being like the things that your stuff looks like. You
Mm-hmm.
should have um, some kind of craft around the execution portion. So that um, and yeah, there's a couple from my end. What about you, Patricia? What kind of things from the other side, from the hiring manager side, do you see as red flags?
Yeah, I want to add a little more about the collaboration. We discussed like how to talk about collaboration in some of our dream design job courses, but collaboration in general, you should be very detailed about how you talk about it because it shows experience. And what else did I want to say about that? I guess it's important to talk about because of what you said. Like, collaboration is design, basically. Like,
Mm.
you're bringing a bunch of ideas in. And yeah, there are specific ways you can talk about it. We have more on our website if you want a little more information. But another one that I guess you and I talked about this because you had an experience is being too lackadaisical or chill about the interview process. And I like this vibe, but some people may perceive this as, do you really want the job?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I also had a firsthand experience with this because I wasn't really looking to switch, but the company that I was interviewing with was interesting, but like the way I like spoke to them was kind of like, yeah, I'm just like kind of browsing right now. I'm not really necessarily looking to switch, but if the right opportunity came up, then I'd be open. Um, so I mean, from like the interview preparation status perspective, like I had my presentation ready, like the things I talked
You have
about.
the basics.
Yeah, I got the basics down, but the company I was interviewing with was like a startup, and
Mm. They
they
need,
really wanted someone who was like all in, and I
yeah.
just didn't give off that vibe.
Hmm.
So it probably was a good decision on their end to not continue the process with me because I wasn't all in.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
That's a good red flag. It's like
yeah,
a,
it is a
oh,
red flag for them. So I don't
yeah.
fault them for that. I'm not like butthurt about it.
Hmm.
I know that is important for them, and I want them to find a designer that is really passionate about their product and about their
Hmm.
mission. So
Yep. So true. So lastly, a red flag. I mean, this is not really the fault of the candidate at all of the time, but when a candidate doesn't know how to answer questions specific to a rubric that the candidate is unaware of because there are always rubrics and competencies on the other side. And sometimes these are cross mapped with the job description. Sometimes they're not, because of whatever reason, like maybe the competencies are written after the job description, or the rubric is written after the job description. And so sometimes it doesn't connect. So you often times may not find insight into how to interview or present the information that they want to hear. You might be able to sense it in early interviews, but you have to be really diligent about taking notes from all of your calls in order to kind of map that for yourself. And yeah, it's a red flag because we as a hiring team are always trying to not hire by gut check. And so this is where the rubric comes in. When we hire by rubric, the answers and responses we get from the candidate has to map to it strongly. Yeah. I don't really have any suggestions for how to kind of make sure you don't have these red flags, but maybe, just reread the job description and make sure that you are listening during the interviews to get certain cues.
Totally. I mean, just being cognizant and being aware of, putting yourself in other person's shoes, that kind of thought exercise is super helpful, because oftentimes we're thinking about, how can we like make sure that our presentation is like, communicating X, Y, and Z. But you don't really think about like, what is actually this company looking for? And I should probably cater my stuff towards that company. And if you do that kind of thought exercise, you'd be surprised with the kinds of changes that you would make to the way that you talk about your experience, the way you talk about your projects. So, but anyways, I mean, I think that concludes all the categories that I had written down around potential design interview red flags. Thanks, Patricia, for all your thoughts on that. And thanks, y'all, for joining this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on LinkedIn. And if you're curious about some of the products and that Patricia and I have kind of come up with to help you prepare for your interviews, be sure to check us out at dreamdesignjob.com. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.